When you want to get on HR's good side, sometimes you just have to maliciously comply. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, write about a time I was disrespected? Sure, I'll write about you. When I was in high school, we got a new principal who had a very annoying policy, I don't know what else to call it, where 2 times a week we would stay extra in homeroom and be given a prompt to write about. Now, I actually love to write fiction. The prompts we were given were always Hallmark's special dribble that were stale to write. Think along the lines of, write about a time you and your friend had an argument and how you worked through it type of prompts. I found them belittling, boring, and a waste of both students' and teachers' time. Sometimes I'd refuse to write. Sometimes I'd write like 2 sentences just to appease my teacher. I don't know why they irked me so badly, but they really did. So one day we got a prompt along the lines of, write about a time when you were/felt disrespected and how you overcame it. Initially, I just refused to write, but my teacher, who was my favorite teacher, pushed, saying I needed to write something to turn in. I sat thinking for a bit before a perfect scenario came to mind, and I felt like I was grinning like the Grinch. I decided to write about my orientation at the school. So when I went to orientation, my mom went with me and it started in the auditorium with the principal giving a speech and overview. We sat in the front row, and I noticed the principal check out my mom more than once. After the auditorium, we could walk around, and my mom wanted to ask the principal some questions. During their interaction, I once again noticed him checking out my mom's boobs. She was in just a t-shirt, but is a C-cup, so even in a basic t-shirt, there's some cleavage. Afterwards, my mom said how nice he was, and I looked at her and said, "Mom, he was checking you out the whole time," and we moved on. I wrote about this and also mentioned how he never apologized and how I felt he had disrespected both of us. I turned it in with a crap-eating grin. Being my favorite teacher, they knew something was up when I'd actually completed this writing prompt while also being happy about it. I sat down and they immediately started reading it. He let out a surprised loud "ha-ha," and I looked over with a smile and said, "What's wrong, teacher? Something funny?" He just laughed quietly while the rest of the class looked at me confused. I thought that was the end of it, but later got called to the guidance counselor. They had my writing and asked me about it. One of the first defenses was, I'm sure he wasn't really staring at her chest. Sometimes he just isn't paying attention. Which instantly made it worse to me since they were essentially defending him. When they realized that didn't go the way they wanted, she switched to, "I'm sorry you both felt this way about the interaction. Would you like us to talk to him about it? We could arrange for him to apologize to you both if that'll help resolve things." I said no. To be honest, I hadn't found it to be a huge deal. Men can be disrespectful, and this was an instance of that, so I just wanted to move on and forget it, not bring more attention to myself. I had written about it more to throw his stupid prompt assignment back in his face rather than try to get an apology from him. I don't know if he ever saw or was told about the writing, but it was a satisfying morning for me. So considering this made it all the way to the guidance counselor, do you guys think that the principal did hear word of this? Like, I wonder if that guidance counselor was more, okay, well, I guess I gotta respect OP's wishes and not mention it. Or considering they essentially defended him, they went to the whole DEFCON 1, they're trying to get you canceled, watch your back, and more importantly, don't chest watch anymore. Rare Philosopher 346 commented, "I have always hated assignments like that, whether in college or team building exercises at work. Share with us a time when you felt, no thank you. I am not comfortable making myself vulnerable around people I don't know well. I have my public persona, and I guard that at all times. It's only with those that I know and trust that I'll let my guard down. Fortunately, I've been able to say, I'm not comfortable participating in this, and I won't. And it's been okay." Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy awesome stories of malicious compliance, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is, Professor demands we stick to schedule. We stick to schedule. This was last year. In hindsight, I feel a little bad for the professor. He wasn't the worst I'd ever had, and he was up against a university which was in turmoil behind the scenes and spearheading an untested new course. That being said, I am paying quite exorbitantly for this education, and he was a right snot about this, so It was a history course, and one of the assignments was a group project wherein we presented in front of the class. There was a 3-hour seminar taking place in a lecture hall. the last hour of which was reserved for 2 groups to go up and present at a half-hour apiece. This would involve a Q&A session afterwards, just to keep us on our toes, I suppose. Professor really emphasized that we pick the week and topic we're going to present in, and that's that. It's first come first serve, and if you miss your spot, you get a 0. Thought nothing of it at the time, seemed fair. Didn't like his attitude, but whatever, right? Well, I won the lottery with the group I was assigned. They were grand lads and a dream to work with. We decided on an advantageous week to present, given our schedules, and we spent the run-up fine-tuning this presentation and really getting it to work. We used a stopwatch and everything. We even brought in outsiders to ask questions we might not predict. All was well. Except we were presenting in week 5, and a disturbing pattern had emerged during the seminars in weeks 2, 3, and 4. For all this talk about keeping things constrained and everyone working within a schedule, whoever went second was screwed. The first group always ran long, and the second group had to make do with, at most, 20 minutes. You could see the stress on their faces. So come week 5, the rest of my group, a little bit more nervous than I am, worries aloud about whether or not all our careful planning will be for pot. I decided to throw a Hail Mary, thinking that the worst I could get is a no, right? So I go up right before class and ask the professor, what are the odds we might go on first out of the 2? After all, we're sure to have this down to 30 minutes. The dude proceeds to rake me across the coals in front of everyone. It was a normal speaking voice, but the podium was right by the door and people were filing in. Tells me not to ask such a stupid question and to go back to my seat. I go back, tail between my legs, ticked off, and sit with steam shooting out of my ears for the next 2 hours. Sure enough, the other group goes first, and sure enough, they run long. We shoot concerned looks to the professor, who's too busy watching the other group to notice. Come 50 minutes in, and the first group is just about wrapping up. The guys in my group are silently freaking out about this. Nightmare, right? That's when the professor stands up, polite applause all around, and then says, well, I guess we're finishing early today, huh? Like a scene out of a courtroom drama, the 4 of us stand up like a shot and ask what the heck is going on. He can't quite hear us from the back, and we're all talking at once, so he asks, what's going on? I charge down those steps like King Kong, in the same tone of voice, in front of the same door that people were now filing out of. I tell this guy that we're booked for the assignment today and we have something prepared. What? Turns out he totally plumb forgot that we were presenting today. And that's why he was so mad at my suggestion earlier. So I tell him we're presenting now to an empty room or he's giving us 100. The poor guy sure did try. Insisted we hadn't signed up this week. We had. Insisted that he could schedule us in next week. Even assuming 2 of 4 of our group weren't away on placement for their teaching degree, we booked for this week as ordered. Insisted that he had somewhere to be. Not my problem, mate. Dude just had to wear it. After making a phone call to presumably his next appointment, he had to stand there, white as a sheet, and wear it. I'll never forget the look on his face. So we presented to a lecture hall empty of all but the professor and 2 students who, I guess, wanted to see more of the show. We got a great grade to boot. Hey, I mean, at that point, when OP's walked up there to the front and has completely laid down the law and stood up for their entire group, it's gonna be already like way less pressure to present, let alone the fact that you don't even have to do it to the class, just 2 kids and a teacher. If there was ever an easier presenting opportunity, I don't know what it would be. Bear Lindsay commented, I was expecting you to stand up in the middle of the first group for your scheduled start time, but this is so much better. Our next story is, want to keep our security deposits? We'll just keep your laptops. Okay, for context, my cousin goes to this private school that gives out these laptops at the beginning of the school year. These laptops hold the vast majority of their schoolwork, and as such have custom software to limit their usage to said schoolwork. Because of all of these factors, everyone who received one was instructed to pay a $200 security deposit that would not be returned if they damaged or lost theirs. On to the story, when the end of their school year came closer and people started returning their laptops, the school started claiming BS damages on the laptops and kept the deposits. Obviously, this didn't sit well with a lot of students and parents who knew good and well there was no damage to speak of. and so they began to claim they simply lost them and let the school keep the deposit since they weren't getting it back in the first place. As more and more students did this, my cousin included, the school went full dictator mode and claimed to prevent students from graduating if they did not return their laptops, which again went against the signed agreement/contract, and woo boy did that set off the powder keg. Several parents got their lawyers and filed a case against the school for breach of contract, and even the media got involved covering the corrupt school's policy. Students refused to attend the class for the final weeks, parents were protesting in front of the school lawn, even some faculty and staff quit. It was a whole thing. In the end, my cousin told me it ended up settled out of court because they couldn't take the bad PR anymore, and a part of it was the return of the deposit for the laptop's return. However, she wasn't giving hers back and asked me to jailbreak the software so it worked like a normal one, and I did. Mostly just had to save her personal data and then wipe the software from it. I know some of you will comment, it's just $200, they didn't need lawyers if they were already paying for private school anyway. And to you, I say, would you be okay being blatantly cheated out of extra money when you're already paying for a service? Because seriously, what do they expect to happen? That's several thousands of dollars spread out among several students. I don't know the exact number, maybe 300. Of course, they wouldn't just sit back and let you cheat them. So I just think the kind of clientele and parents that can afford to send their kids to private school, those likely are the kinds of people that can afford to sue over getting cheated out of $200. If you want to scam students' parents out of money and hope that they don't have the resources to fight you, probably not smart to do it against the private school kids who are already paying probably good rates to go there. Poison Plushie commented, my school did a similar thing to us about 25 years ago. We switched from being assigned textbooks by the school and were instead sold the textbooks. The idea was that they would buy them back from us at the end of the year for the same price. So they handed out crappy textbooks and then shortchanged people when they handed them in because they were damaged. Word spread quickly and most people ended up keeping them and reselling them to the students coming up a year behind us. They threw a fit, saying we wouldn't move on to the next grade if we didn't hand them in. And the parents of all the top scoring students, we all had been planning to keep our textbooks right from the start anyway because, yay, textbooks, got involved and told them that they would yank us all and sue if they had to, so the school got back less than half their textbooks and had to buy a load of new ones, which then they couldn't move because of the amount of people who were selling them on to the upcoming year. The year before that, one of our teachers stole a bunch of books and I guess sold them or something, because when it came time to hand in our books, our entire grade was charged for a book we weren't given and didn't study when we didn't hand them in spite of the fact that it was the entire grade of over 100 students, nobody believed that they weren't given to us. Swifty replied, that is freaked. I took a class in college where we were required to buy a school-branded book. Can't resell because it was unique, written by the professor. It was a trash book, but we needed it for assignments. The kicker is that the professor went AWOL and refused to address problems with his crappy TAs. I ended up going in person to the dean with a binder of receipts proving that I was mathematically owed an A. Freak that guy, got my A. Our next story is, college administration says that AI is here to stay. It sure is, and it will reduce cheating. I'm a college professor and teach a first-year core linguistics unit. Cheating has always been a problem, more so with the advent of AI where some students turn in referenceless ChatGPT word salad. There are tools that can detect AI written text. It's not definite, but if a piece of text is assessed as being likely AI written, coupled with a student being unable to defend themselves in an oral viva, then it's pretty solid evidence. I submitted academic dishonesty reports for several students. I was hoping to spend an hour or so on call in total with those students and ask them questions about their essays. I got an email back from admins saying that they would not entertain having oral vivas, that AI detectors give false positives, so unless there is an actual AI prompt in their essay, we don't want to hear about it. And that even if they did cheat, it's just a sign of adaptability to modern economic forces. They finally told me that I should therefore learn to incorporate AI in my classes. This happened 12 months ago. Okay, college administration, I will learn to incorporate AI in my classes. I'm the course coordinator for the core unit. I have the full control over the syllabus. I started to use an AI proctoring software for all of my assessment and quizzes. This software can use facial recognition and track keystrokes and copy pasting. I also changed the syllabus to have several shorter writing assessments, i.e. 400 words instead of a couple large ones, i.e. 1500 words. Before you dislike me for ruining students' lives, this is a first-year course. Additionally, only citizens can enroll in online degrees in my country, and they only need to start paying back their student loans if they earn more than $52,000 a year. The result? Cheating has been reduced to a nil in my unit. All forms of cheating have been abolished in my class, including paid ghostwriting, AI, and human. I was called to a meeting a few weeks ago where a board told me that data analysis showed that a higher proportion of new students in my major are discontinuing their degree, and that this was forecast to cost them hundreds of thousands in tuition and CSP funding over the next few years. They told me that they fear my unconventional assessment method might be to blame. I simply stated that I was told to incorporate modern technologies. We're offering an asynchronous online degree. Our pathos is to uphold academic honesty, and that I offer flexible AI-driven asynchronous assessment options that are less demanding than having to write large essays. Ah yes, it only really truly begins to matter and make a difference when it all comes down to the money. I was surprised too, commented, them even mentioning financial fallout revealed their true motivations. Exchanging the reputability of that degree is beyond short-sighted and bankrupts those who have invested the time and effort to show they deserve the degree. Don't let them get away with trying to turn your university into a paper mill. Tell as many of your colleagues as possible of your practices, make it easy for them to implement them, and write letters to whatever professional organizations you belong to. Student loans should not be a profit center. This next story is, boss was reluctant to do anything about deadweight coworker because he wasn't making obvious mistakes. We decided to make it obvious. We had this coworker on our team. The best way to describe him is to use a Homer Simpson line. Everyone says they have to work a lot harder when I'm around. Projects given to him usually were not completed correctly, not entirely completed, or not even worked on at all. He violated security protocols, gave out equipment to other departments, and would occasionally disappear for hours. He would always have someone else to blame for his problems, contractors, staff in other departments. But the last straw for the rest of us was when he tried to throw his own team under the bus. We all knew he was skating by because we would fix his mistakes to keep everything else running. And admittedly, it's hard to get fired from a state job. But after blaming us and having to hear about it, that was the last straw. So the rest of us on the team stopped helping him, and we stopped fixing his mistakes. He wasn't making obvious mistakes before. Now they were obvious. The mistakes were piling up, and fast. We would collaborate with him only down to the bare minimum. He had no reason to blame us if our contributions to a project were completed and his weren't. And then came the kiss of death. He took a week off. With him not around, everything that piled up started getting completed by the rest of us. New tasks were completed on top of that and on time. Even my boss could not ignore the simple fact that the place ran smoother without him around. After he returned, everything started piling back up again. So we came into work a couple weeks ago and it was announced that he had left the organization. Not one person was surprised. The thing that amazes me about this whole thing is that nobody coordinated it. None of us hatched a plan. We all just individually decided that enough was enough. You want it obvious? You got it. It is impressive how much it takes to get fired for some people. My last two jobs both featured a teammate who essentially collected a paycheck and did nothing in return. At least my manager here had the balls to do what was needed. It's also amazing that in the end, there's less work to do with him gone because tasks don't need to be done twice anymore. This kind of reminds me of the time that I finally got a quality lawnmower instead of using the crappy old hand-me-down one. You know, mowing the lawn is just so much faster and more convenient when you don't have to push it forward and then pull it back the 1 foot you pushed it just to make sure it actually fully cut the grass. Spice Woman commented, It feels so nice to just let the dead weight pull themselves down, doesn't it? I worked at a restaurant where we would all run our own food to the tables. We were very teamwork oriented. Everyone ran whatever food was up in the window for whoever. Then we got a new hire who never ever ran food. I don't think I'd ever seen her so much as glance at the food in the window when she walked by, no matter how busy we were or how much food needed to be delivered, for months. Well, one night her food came up, and one by one, with zero discussion, we all looked at it and then walked away over and over. Her food sat there for 20 minutes after it was done, without a single one of the 10-ish other servers working that night touching it. She finally came back after her guest had been waiting a full 40 minutes since they'd originally ordered their food to see why their food hadn't magically appeared at her table yet. I don't know if she got the message and quit, or was finally fired after the manager had to go to her table to smooth things over, but that was the last night I saw her working there. Felt so good just looking at that food and walking away. I did feel bad for the people that had to wait for their food, but the manager took care of them. Some dumb user commented, "From a kitchen perspective, I usually make the owner or front of house manager aware when someone's consistently not doing their fair share of the work. We have a couple of cranky bartenders, and depending on who's on the floor and how busy we are, I sometimes have to tell the servers to get the dang bar food run to her since she's stuck making all the drinks for the entire restaurant. I've had a few outright refuse to run bar food and try to skip out on tipping the bar at the end of the day just because she was grumpy when she got slammed with 40 mixed drinks in a 5 to 10 minute window." Our next story is The Thin Red Dime. Don't come back home. This story isn't what you think it is. Well, now it is, I suppose. I've written many malicious compliances about my adult life. Teaching, running a drive-thru, you name it. Though I've referenced growing up with my father, this is the first time I've written about him directly. There has to be a statute of limitations on speaking ill of the dead, if these balls could talk. Anyway, I'm about 11 years old in Germantown, the projects of Quincy, Massachusetts, living with my father. Anytime I've asked about my mom, I got shot down with "she's a crazy witch." My father had many vices. Tobacco seemed to play the biggest role in our lives and in keeping him relatively sane. Cigarettes lined up like a Clash of Clans skeletal army warding off the much bigger, much more formidable beasts that lie ahead. Individually, a cigarette holds minimal power, yet a million times more power than none. This sad mathematical fact is what brings us to the story of the most malicious of compliances. When my dad ran out of money he got for SSI and SSA, cigarettes became a problem, even in the late 80s. He would have me bum cigarettes from the neighbors. Some neighbors were generous. Some told me how vile it was for a father to send their child to get cigarettes. Some threw chicken bones at me. If only I had the wherewithal to reply, "Ma'am, I'm 11, or at least duck." When it got really bad, he had me walk the town looking for cigarette butts that still had some tobacco left. This was a disgusting activity that I eventually got really good at and really sick of. One night he sends me off on another tobacco mission, but I'm in the middle of a game of Monopoly I'm playing with Chewbacca, Starscream, and Megatron, and it's about to get good. I argued to the point of my dad throwing a handful of crappy coins at me, yelling in his raspy post-thyroidectomy voice, "Don't come back until you have cigarettes I can smoke." Enter malicious compliance. As blood trickles down my face, dripping onto a few dirty coins I managed to retain from their violent travels, I wonder what other crimes these coins have been complicit to. What have you done, little dime? I was done, with all of it. As an 11-year-old, I had very little cards to play, but one of them landed right in my lap. I walked in the dead of the night directly up the unnamed dirt road my dad used to drive me down whilst sitting on the hood, back when I was a few years younger, when I was his type. Am I ready to do this? I keep walking, seeing many cigarette butts and even an uncrushed pack, ignoring them all as I walk to the fire station. I know there's a payphone there, and this time, my dad's gonna pay. I look down at my coins, my bloody dime, and call my Aunt Stella. She told me earlier this year that anytime I needed help, call her. My dad always insisted I don't do this or ever call her for anything because all she wants to freaking do is rat me out and see me in jail so she can keep you. Sounds like a plan. When she picked up, she knew right away, but explained in way too much detail what happened the last few months and then years, even including the essay from my dad back when he was still into me, if these balls could talk. Anyway, I cried and tears well up even now, remembering how it all just flowed out of me like a river of garbage falling over me. I knew this was gonna be big trouble if I didn't have the cigarettes, and I told her. She risked her life driving to us, pack of cigarettes in her hand as she picked me up and told me to stay in the car. Even through the closed windows of a Chevy Nova, I could hear her yell, "Here's your freaking cigarettes, I'm taking OP." The saddest thing was that he took the cigarettes and turned around, no argument. He didn't even fight for me. I don't even know why, to this day, I even wanted him to. Aunt Stella did what I knew she would, call the cops on him and take me in. He went to jail then, eventually out of state, after kids kept coming out of the woodwork who were his victims. I never looked back. Who am I kidding? I looked back every day since. This is one of those stories that are like the embodiment of that gif of SpongeBob just sitting in a cafe with a coffee next to him. One of those stories you read and you're just like, man. I mean, I'm just glad the story ended with OP getting away from him. And also, I gotta just say, I think OP's a really good writer too. There were little choices all throughout their story that I really kind of enjoyed. Contrantier commented, "Dang, I hope by now you stopped looking back. He's not going to survive where he's going. He's probably been back to prison more times than you realize if he keeps finding victims. But you're powerful for making it this far, and I'm sure you'll finish strong." One detail I got confused about: when he threw coins at your face, where did the sudden trickling blood come from? Our next story is HR Doesn't Like Me. Way back in winter 2006-2007, a classmate got a promotion at work. So a dozen or so of us night shift production folks went out to celebrate that Thursday, payday. This included two of his supervisors that we got along with. Important for later. Of course, with most of us being in our early 20s, we drank until the bar closed and then split off to keep drinking. 5 of us went to his place, 3 of us being classmates. Number 4 was a fellow tech from my line. Number 5 was a production tester from his line. My classmates were getting a hands-on with number 5, so I drove number 4 home somewhere around 5 a.m. That Sunday, I made a comment to classmate number 2 that usually you take them for supper first while I was on that line. It was overheard by a couple of the people that had joined us. That comment was the only one I made. Also important for later, couple weeks go by and I get sent by my line manager to go see HR in the middle of my shift. It was a semi-expected meeting based on what I'd heard around there. I spent close to an hour getting grilled and told HR exactly what I saw and said, as well as mentioned his supervisors that were there. See note. Found out 2 things. Folks had been spreading rumors for 2 weeks, and she was underage for the bar. Essentially, folks were calling her a very active tramp. HR required me to send an apology email out because they figured out I was the source. See note. Oh boy, did I send an email out. CC'd the entire freaking company stating what I saw and that I was only apologizing for my original comment that usually you buy them supper first, but not for what it had snowballed into, as I hadn't even said it more than once. Also stated that her own supervisors should have known she was underage. Funny enough, HR sent an email out the next day telling people to not spread rumors. She left a week or so later. I was promoted in July 2007, and there was still no mention of that email or event when I was promoted again in 2009 and again in 2010. My exit interview also made no mention of it in 2010. HR never did have another meeting with me, even though I know there were other complaints about me, almost like they didn't want another company-wide email going out. I mean, I think it just depends on what the complaints were, because obviously HR knows OP is not going to stand for any kind of loony business. OP is not going to bend over to HR and apologize for something that really wasn't OP's responsibility or fault. I mean, OP's absolutely right. They made one jokey comment that even still I don't think should get you in trouble with HR, and other people took that and ran and snowballed it into something huge. It's not OP's fault. Coco Pele commented, "Sure, it was malicious compliance to put HR on notice with a company-wide email after what sounds like a weak investigation. But is anyone else feeling bad for the underage, assuming under drinking age, person number 5 for being the subject of much discussion and then having their sex life discussed in a company-wide email?" But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another crazy malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.